What is up, dudes and lady dudes? Welcome back to JustNutz, guys. Today, I have a new deck profile. This time we're looking at UAs with the new support from Phantom Rage. I finally got it. I literally had the new cards except for the field spell, and for some reason it took like 2 weeks to ship in the mail because my local shop didn't have any at the time when I went there to get it. So, woo, we finally have it built. And I'm really stoked. This is such a personal deck for me. Like, I always loved this deck growing up, or at least, like, you know, over the last couple of years, because you know, separate from Yu-Gi-Oh, I'm actually a pretty big sports fan. I pay attention mainly to like hockey, basketball, and football, but you know, just, I don't know, big sports. I also love sports anime, Haikyuu, Kurokono Basket, Ace of Diamond, like stuff like that. So there's a lot of like, I don't know. There's just like a lot of cool things with this deck, and the buff really does help the new cards. I think if you had asked me like, John, what does the deck need more than anything? Like, 3 things that the deck needs, and I was like, okay, the deck needs like a second normal summon. It needs a searcher to add consistency. Got that. And you need another big monster that's like a little more flexible than the other ones, which we got that as well, a little bit better to draw. So they literally hit the nail on the head on all 3. Now, I'm not saying it makes the deck amazing, but it does put the deck in a place where it can play. And honestly, I could see somebody on the right day topping a regional with this deck, because it actually is like slept on for sure. So without further ado, let's just jump into it. All right, so starting off with the basic monsters, we've got 3 UA Libero Spiker and 2 copies of UA Midfielder. They're both really awesome. And you might notice that it's weird that I'm playing 2 midfielder instead of 3 like we were in the past, but with the addition of him and the addition of essentially 4 more cards with the new field spell and terraforming that get us 2, you know, him as well, you know, you kind of like take away 1, add I don't know, 3 plus you add 7, right? So you have just so many ways to get to these guys now that you don't need to max out on them. And most people, competitive players, say like only play 5 normal summons. We got a ton of ways to search them out, but only 5 here. This guy's awesome. He's really, really good. So he has the effect where he can like swap himself onto the field. But also he has a quick effect during your, I think it's only during your opponent's main phase. Let me make sure. Yeah, during your opponent's main phase, you can shuffle level 5 or higher UA monster that's in your hand back into the deck to special summon another UA straight from the deck on your opponent's turn, and then you bounce himself back to the hand, which is actually pretty good because then he loads himself up, so he's not in danger of being removed anymore, and then he, you know, you can summon him again next turn. So he's really good. The only thing they could have done to make this guy better is instead of making him have that quick effect, if they literally just made him a Rhoda or like a Stratos, like on normal summon, you can add any UA monster from deck to hand. That would have been like the best thing you could do, because you plus so hard in this deck if that was the case. But I understand why they didn't. It's still a good card nonetheless. And then midfielder is midfielder. He tags out on your opponent's turn. Whoop-de-doo. All right, then for the big boys, we play 2 copies of UA Player Manager. This is the new boss monster. 2 copies of UA Perfect Ace. 1 copy of UA Dreadnought Dunker, and 1 copy of UA Blackbacker. I always do that. Blackbacker. Blockbacker. Jesus Christmas. All right. So these guys, they're all very cool. They do their own thing. They kind of just have different things that they do. Some are more offensive, some are more defensive. Player Manager says when a UA monster is summoned while he's in the hand, he can special himself. And then he triggers on special summon to either target a card on the field and destroy it, or negate the effects of all monsters on the field except for UA monsters until the end of the turn. So it can be a blanket negate all the monsters on the field, or it can just pop a card. It's pretty good regardless, because you can just tutor him out with our new monster. Just quick effect summon him on your opponent's turn, and then Dryden, just pop a card. Pretty good. And I like that he summons himself. Like, so many of these need to swap, but he actually just jumps on the field. Additionally, which is one of the really important things that the deck definitely lacked before, is it didn't have a way to put like multiple bodies on the field quickly, so he definitely helps with that. Then you have UA Perfect Ace. This is an Omni Negate. You just have to discard a card for it, and it's a soft once per turn, which is important to note too. So if you had one on the field, you could like negate something with 1, and then if you also had Spiker, you could Spiker out a second one, and then as long as you still have discard fodder, you could negate a second card. You know, Omni Negates are pretty good. And then you have these guys, UA Dreadnought Dunker. He's pretty good. He says if he destroys a card by battle, he can pop a card on the field, and he also deals piercing. Actually, sorry, I was off on that. If he deals damage, he gets to pop a card on the field, and he deals piercing. So even if he attacks something in defense mode, as long as it's lower than 25, he's still going to get to pop a card on the field. So he's more of an offensive card for your turn, but you're not really using him as much on your opponent's turn. But that's why you summon him, then you swap him back for another one of the more defensive, disruptive ones, and then let them do their job. And then you have a block backer. He's pretty good. He says while he's on the field, if your opponent special summons a monster, you can change its battle position and then negate its effects. So obviously it doesn't work on link monsters, but it's the biggest booty in 2700, so he's the biggest wall to get around. And sometimes you just want like him with like one of the perfect aces, and you'll have an ability to like tag out into your player manager. So you'd have like a negate, a hard negate, omni negate with the perfect ace, and the ability to like Dryden on your opponent's turn. So there's a lot of good flexibility there in the way you can get your disruptions going, which I really, really like that. And I just love the mechanic this deck plays with. You just swap your offensive creatures out when you're going into your opponent's turn, so you can play defensively, and then when it's back to your turn, you're going to summon the Dreadnought Dunker again and start going to town, which is really awesome. All right, then for the hand traps, because you gotta play them, okay? This deck really needs the help. I play 3 copies of Dimension Shifter, 2 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, and I don't have them at the moment, but this is 2 copies of Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill. Okay, so the idea here is, listen, this deck ceiling is not as high as a lot of decks in the game. So if you're trying to make this deck be able to compete on a level with a lot of those decks, you need to play bigger blowout cards like Dimension Shifter, okay? This card makes most combo decks just pass, and this deck could not care less about anything ending up in grave. So that's very, very, or not ending up in grave, I should say. So it's very, very good. It's very, very powerful. And to kind of work with it, you want to play hand traps that don't need to be sent to graveyard specifically, because then they won't work in conjunction with Dimension Shifter. So Ash only needs to be discarded generically. Same thing with Ghost Mourner, so they do not need to be sent to grave, so they'll still resolve even if they get banished off Shifter. So that just makes sense there. And then just like Ash hits everything. Ghost Mourner is just like slightly less versatile, like what? I guess you wouldn't even say less versatile. It just has to trigger on summon, and so it's a little less activation requirements, a little less versatile than like Effect Veiler. But Veiler has to be sent to grave, so it will get banished and not resolve under Shifter, which is tough. All right, and then we move to the spells, okay? So obviously you go in on the field spells, 3 copies of the new Hyper Stadium, 3 copies of the old Stadium, and 1 Terraforming. You don't want to play set rotation in this deck, because this deck wants to activate both field spells in the same turn if possible. So, the set rotation says if your opponent hasn't flipped up their field spell yet, you can't activate any new field spells. And so you don't want to lock yourself out of being able to activate more field spells later on. But yeah, opening up these 2 is a 2-card combo that gets you, I believe, is it 2 or 3 disruptions? Either way, it's like a +2. It's pretty strong. And gets you, because like this card's insane. It's literally like Rodon activation, searching a UA monster. Then you can reveal another UA Stadium, so you can reveal this in your hand to then allow yourself to gain an additional normal summon that turn. So this searched you a normal summon, then you can reveal this to get the extra normal summon the first one, then you can activate, then you can activate UA Stadium, then get the normal summon, and then UA Stadium will let you search for another one. So, you know, you just like searching and searching, you're just setting up your whole play just off of these 2 cards, and it's very good. They're good for consistency. This card's way better. I used to not even like this card as much because you weren't consistently opening a normal summon, but now you open it so consistently, I do not mind playing it at 3 at all. And it gives your monsters a buff, permanent 500 attack buff, which can be huge for, you know, as the duel goes on, playing beatdown and stuff. All right, for some additional cards, consistency cards, extenders, 2 or 3 UA Signing Deal. You got to play this card at 3. This card's insane. It just special summons any UA monster straight from the deck, but it negates its effects, and then you got to pay 300 life points times the level. So you summon a level 4, you're going to lose 1,200. You summon a level 7, I think is the other biggest one. No, maybe there's an 8. So you can play up to 2,400, but to be honest, if it's a free monster out of the deck, it works because all the UA monsters just want to swap. So as long as you have any UA monster in hand, you could just immediately swap anyway and then summon them back and get their effects, and no big deal. And then obviously the Rhoda. I like this because it can be either Libero Spiker or midfielder. Just more consistency, just really good. And then for the last of the spells, 3 Pot of Extravagance and 1 Harpy's Feather Duster. Extravagance just insane in this deck. You like do not go into your extra deck at all. I decided not to try and do any of the like Ice Soul, like equipped spell shenanigans. I think the equipped spell and the quick play spell for this archetype are like interesting, but they're just not consistent. The deck doesn't have a very good way to consistently search the spells and traps in the archetype, and so like just playing them is like, oh, if you hard draw them, you kind of have to make use of them, whereas you can't just like consistently just get them whenever you want them, unfortunately. So I decided not to play them. You can side them if you want, because they're definitely better going second. I think both of them are. So like that could be something, but I don't like them overall, so I decided to play this. You don't use the extra deck at all, so this is just draw 2 or baits and negate, which is really nice. The deck needs cards that can bait negates before like normal summoning, which is very important. And then Harpy's Feather Duster. Again, it kind of goes in the same line as Dimension Shifter. Is like the deck's just less powerful. So if you play a back row deck, which this deck has a terrible matchup against. You don't want to play any back row decks with this deck. Harpy's Feather Duster just helps you just kind of like one card, either beta negate, beta solemn, or like a negate, and then just wipes a back row, which is huge. Wipes all your opponent's back row, which could be huge. So I just feel like it covers a weakness, and it's a power card that could potentially just steal you games, which the deck definitely needs if you can play it. And then we finish up with 3 impermanents, so this goes with our other 8 hand traps. Again, this one doesn't have to be sent to grave to do its effect, so it works with Dimension Shifter. Then 2 Goes in Match and 1 Macrocosmos, finishing up the list. Same thing. We talked about Dimension Shifter, and that's a big power card going second, or even going first too. Same thing with like Harpy's Feather Duster, like going second. It's like a huge card, especially against back row decks. These guys are your going first blowout cards. Like so many decks, so many meta decks right now, especially combo decks, just like lose to these. Like they can't do much at all under these. Goes in's huge because like Infernobles can't go into Halqui-Fibrex or Isold at all, and they just don't really do much plays if they can't go into either of those monsters. So Goes in Match is huge there. Macro is huge as well. It's just permanent Dimension Shifter, so just another blowout card. Just so many decks can't play if their stuff gets banished. So just a blowout card, it can just steal you wins, and that's the big thing. Is like this deck just doesn't care at all about either of these. All your monsters are Earth Warriors. If you wanted to play Rivalry instead of Gozen, that's up to you. It just depends on the format. So maybe Rivalry could be better in a specific format, but I think Gozen is the better one at the moment, because like dragons can do a whole like combo sticking into dragons, and Infernobles can still just go into Isold, and they don't even need Hulk. If they go into Isold and it resolves, they still get to do like pretty much the whole combo. So that's kind of tough as well. But yeah, that's my 40 card list. I'm not even going to show you an extra deck, guys. Like seriously, I really thought about it, and I was just like, I just don't care. Like if we're in a format where like Super Poly is good, you can side Super Poly. If we're in a format where I don't know, like Ghost Reaper, but Ghost Reaper hasn't been good for 5 years. Anything that could you could play targets for like the Dogmatica stuff. If they try to Equimax you could play the Intises, or you could play the Makaba Cyber Dragon Nova like combo. You do whatever you want, honestly. They're just like the plays to the meta. You could play the Cyber Dragon Contact Fusion in case you run into that player at locals or regionals or whatever. That's up to you. There's so much flexibility. You literally do not care at all. You could play Isold just to link into it to add you a normal summon, but like at that point you probably had to link off a normal summon, so I don't really get why you would ever make that play. So it just didn't make sense. Like if you want to play stuff, absolutely go for it. That's up to you if you want to get creative. I just decided like not to put it in because it's so unconsequential to me at the moment. It's literally just there so that you can resolve Pot of Extravagance at the moment. You're not going into anything. You're playing maybe also the Earth Charmer. She could be potentially okay. Revive like a alpha or something like that. That's actually decent, but other than that, there's just like not much like worry to throw into the extra deck, honestly. So get creative there. You can do anything you want there, but this is my list for UAs for post Phantom Rage. The support really helped this deck out. If you thought this deck was cool, it's extremely cheap. Seriously, so cheap. I know I have stuff like Extravagance in here, but other than Extravagance, like you don't have to play the D Shifter and the Ghost Mourners and stuff. Like that's up to you. Or the impermanences. You could play your whatever hand traps you want to play, whatever ones you have access to. Don't even worry about it. I mean, the deck just needs a little help going second for sure. But that's going to do it for me here. Thank you so much for watching, as always, guys. You know the drill. Leave me down in the comment section down below any extra advice or tips you might have on the build. It's my first time building UAs in a while, but this build has been working really well for me, especially in the current format. So let me know any thoughts. I build these decks by myself. I'm always taking suggestions on builds. How have you been using the deck? How have you been trying it out? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I will see you in the next video. Subscribe if you want to see more deck profiles from me in the future, and I love you. See you in the next one. Peace.